All right, so today we're diving deep, literally, into the Great Barrier Reef.
One of the most incredible ecosystems on the planet, for sure.
And, we've got some awesome source material to work with today, excerpts from this educational text. We'll explore all the fascinating details, what makes the reef so special, but also the challenges it's up against.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they see the pictures, the beautiful colors, but don't really grasp the sheer scale of it or the fact that it's in danger.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, did you know the Great Barrier Reef is the largest living structure on Earth? It's the only one visible from space.
Yeah.
We're talking 1,400 miles long, made up of over 2,000 individual reefs.
It's mind-boggling when you think about it. And that size, that's what allows it to support such incredible biodiversity.
Yeah.
Thousands of fish species, hundreds of types of coral.
It really is like an underwater city.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this massive, vibrant underwater city. But here's something that I always find fascinating. We often hear coral reefs compared to rainforests, but did you know that those colorful structures are actually made up of tiny animals?
Yeah, coral polyps. It's easy to think of them as plants because they're anchored to the reef,
Right, they take root like plants, but
but they're animals. Each polyp builds a tiny calcium carbonate skeleton, like a little fortress. And over time, all those tiny fortresses create the massive reef structure.
so each of these little polyps is building its own tiny castle.
Exactly.
And together they create this massive, intricate reef structure. It's unbelievable.
And to make it even more incredible, they depend on a symbiotic relationship with algae.
Oh, right. Tell us about that.
Well, the algae live within the coral polyps, providing them with food through photosynthesis. And as a bonus, the algae give the coral its vibrant colors.
So it's like a tiny city within a city, each with its own little partnership going on.
I like that analogy.
But what happens when that partnership breaks down? What about when the algae aren't there?
That's when we see coral bleaching. When the water gets too warm, the coral gets stressed and expels the algae.
So it's not just that the reef becomes less beautiful.
No, without the algae, the coral loses its main food source. It can actually die.
So bleaching is a sign of a much deeper problem.
Absolutely. Bleaching events can devastate the reef. It's really bad.
And of course, this impacts the incredible biodiversity we were talking about earlier. The source material mentions that over 1,500 fish species rely on the Great Barrier Reef.
It's a vital habitat for so many creatures. Sharks, rays, turtles. Even seabirds depend on the reef for food and nesting grounds. If the reef suffers, the entire food web is affected.
It's a bit overwhelming to think about.
Hmm.
So we've got this incredible natural wonder that's supporting all this life, but it's facing some serious challenges.
Yeah. Climate change is the big one, but it's not the only threat. Pollution from things like agricultural runoff is also a major issue. Imagine, all those fertilizers and pesticides washing into the water.
Disrupting that delicate balance.
Right. And then there's overfishing,
Yeah, removing key species from the ecosystem.
which can throw everything off balance.
It's a domino effect.
Yeah.
Our source material also highlighted the economic side of things. Did you know that tourism to the Great Barrier Reef generates over $5 billion a year for the Australian economy?
It's a huge economic driver, no doubt, which is a good incentive to protect the reef, but it also presents its own set of challenges.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking millions of visitors every year. So managing that impact, making sure it's done responsibly, that's crucial.
Striking that balance between allowing people to experience this wonder, but also safeguarding it for the future.
Exactly.
Speaking of the future, that leads us to the big question. What does the future hold for the Great Barrier Reef? Is there hope? Or are we just looking at a slow decline?
Well, that's a question we're going to unpack in the next part of our deep dive. We'll look at some of the initiatives aimed at protecting the reef, and we'll discuss whether they're enough to turn the tide.
Welcome back. So, last time, we left off on a bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah, the big question mark hanging over the future of the Great Barrier Reef.
Exactly. We talked about all the beauty, the incredible life it supports,
Yeah.
but also all the threats it's facing. So, is there hope? Is there a way to protect this amazing ecosystem?
Well, our source material points to a few things. One that caught my eye was the Paris Agreement. A lot of people see that as a potential turning point.
Right, the international agreement to try and limit global warming.
Hmm.
But how exactly does that help the reef?
Well, as we discussed, rising water temperatures are one of the main drivers of coral bleaching.
Right. Stress those corals out, make them expel the algae.
Exactly. So the logic is if we can curb global warming, slow down that temperature rise, we can give the reef a fighting chance.
Okay, that makes sense. But is it really enough? I mean, even if every country sticks to the agreement, isn't there still going to be a temperature increase?
That's the tough part. The Paris Agreement, it's more about buying time than a complete solution. Even in the best case scenario, the reef is going to have to adapt to a warmer world.
So it's more about damage control than a full recovery.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. It's about, mitigating the worst impacts of climate change while we figure out more drastic measures.
Like what kind of drastic measures are we talking about?
Well, there's a lot of research going on in that area. Things like coral nurseries.
Oral nurseries.
Yeah, they basically grow coral fragments in controlled environments and then transplant them onto damaged reefs.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So kind of like giving the reef a helping hand.
Exactly. And they're also looking into selective breeding, trying to develop coral that's more resilient to warmer temperatures.
So it's not just about preserving the reef as it is now, but helping it evolve to survive in a changing world.
Right. The reef of the future might look different, but it could still be a healthy, vibrant ecosystem. But remember, all of this, it hinges on addressing climate change.
Right, which unfortunately is a massive global problem.
It is. It's going to take a coordinated effort from everyone.
Okay, so we've got international agreements and we have all this fascinating scientific research. But what about the here and now? What's happening right now to protect the reef?
Well, our source material mentions the Reef 2050 plan. That's Australia's long-term strategy.
Oh, right. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
It's a pretty comprehensive plan. It covers a lot of ground. Water quality, pollution from agriculture, coastal development.
Sounds like they're really trying to cover all the bases.
They are. It's a huge undertaking.
But sometimes it feels like we're trying to put out a fire with a garden hose when the whole forest is on fire. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It can feel overwhelming. But even small actions can add up, especially when they're combined with those bigger systemic changes.
That's a good point. It's easy to feel powerless when you're talking about a problem this big.
It is, but every little bit helps.
So what can we do as individuals?
Hmm.
I mean, what can one person actually do to make a difference?
Honestly, it starts with education, understanding the problem. The more we know about the reef, the threats it faces, the better choices we can make.
So, educating ourselves, changing our habits, supporting the right causes.
Yeah, and it's not just about individual actions either. It's about using our voices, speaking up for the reef, holding our leaders accountable, pushing for policies that protect the environment.
That reminds me, our source material asks, whose responsibility is it to protect the reef? Is it all on Australia's shoulders? Or is it a global responsibility?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, obviously it's located in Australian waters, so they have a primary responsibility. But the Great Barrier Reef, it's a World Heritage Site. It belongs to everyone.
So it's like we all have a stake in its future.
Exactly. And the choices we make, wherever we are in the world, they can have an impact. Our source material also poses another tough question. It asks, do you think children born today will get a chance to see a colorful Great Barrier Reef?
Ooh, yeah. That one's a bit heavy.
It is. It really makes you think about the legacy we're leaving behind, whether future generations will inherit a healthy reef or, well, something much less vibrant.
It all comes down to the choices we make now.
It does. The next decade is going to be crucial.
Well, that leads us perfectly into the final part of our deep dive. We'll explore what that future might look like, what will happen if we don't take action, and what could a brighter future for the reef and for the planet look like. Okay, so we're back and ready to really look ahead now. What does the future hold for the Great Barrier Reef?
Well, like we've been talking about, it really depends on us. What choices we make, as a global community.
Our source material had a question that really made me stop and think. It asked, do you think children born today will get a chance to see a colorful Great Barrier Reef?
Yeah, that one hits hard.
Yeah.
It makes you realize the stakes, The decisions we make right now, they're going to determine what kind of reef future generations inherit.
So let's talk about that. What would a future without a healthy Great Barrier Reef look like?
Oh, think about the coastlines. They'd be much more vulnerable to storms, erosion.
Because the reef wouldn't be there to protect them.
Exactly.
Right.
And the fishing industry, that would be devastated. Fish populations would plummet.
And of course, all the tourism revenue gone.
Yeah.
Impacting all those local communities.
Absolutely. But it goes beyond the economics, We'd be losing an irreplaceable natural wonder. All that biodiversity gone.
It's a pretty bleak picture. But our source material does offer a glimmer of hope.
Right.
What are some of the things that make you feel optimistic?
Well, I think there's more awareness now than ever before. People are starting to understand how serious climate change is. And we're seeing initiatives like the Paris Agreement.
But like we talked about, the Paris Agreement, that's just a starting point.
It is. But it's a step in the right direction. And there's so much exciting research going on right now, focusing on restoring the reef, helping it adapt.
Oh, yeah, like those coral nurseries.
Exactly. Growing coral in controlled environments and then transplanting it back onto damaged reefs.
Like giving the reef a helping hand. Pretty amazing.
It is. And they're also working on selective breeding, trying to create coral that can withstand warmer temperatures, more acidic water.
So not just preserving the reef as it is, but helping it evolve so it can survive.
Right. The reef of the future might look different, but it could still be a vibrant ecosystem.
That's a good point. It makes me think of another question from our source material. It asks, what words come to mind when you think of the Great Barrier Reef, now that you know more about it?
That's a good one. I guess for me, it's a mix of things. Awe, definitely. The sheer scale of it is just amazing.
Right.
But also concern, knowing how fragile it is. But at the same time, there's hope, knowing that so many people are fighting for it.
I feel that. It's like this mix of holding your breath, hoping we'll make the right choices, but also feeling like we can make a difference.
I think that's the key, right? Knowing that we're not powerless.
So what can we do as individuals? What are some of the things we can actually do to help?
Education is a big one. Learning about the reef, understanding the threats. Because the more we know, the better equipped we are to make informed choices.
Choices about, what we buy, how we live, who we support.
Exactly. And it goes beyond that, too. It's about using our voices,
Yeah.
talking to our friends and family, contacting our elected officials, making sure the reef is a priority.
It's about realizing that we're all part of this story.
We are. And we all have a role to play in shaping the ending.
Well said. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Great Barrier Reef, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge. A challenge to learn more, to make conscious choices, and to use your voice to speak up for this incredible ecosystem. The future of the reef, and really the health of our planet, it depends on all of us. Thanks for joining us.